Welcome back, dear reader, to a world where the most extraordinary journeys begin in the quietest of rooms. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. Max knew it well. It lived behind the eyes in the subtle heaviness of a man who had spent years performing a version of himself so consistently that he had almost forgotten it was a performance. It settled into the shoulders at the end of each workday, when the tie came loose and the jacket was hung, and the briefcase was set by the door, and still the weight didn't lift. The mid-sized city they called home was reliable in its rhythms. Reliable like a metronome, like an accountant's ledger, like a life built on precision that never once asked whether precision was the same thing as truth. By every external measure, Max's life was fine. More than fine. He had a career that paid its respects to order and logic, a beautiful apartment with good light in the mornings, and Lena, warm, perceptive, devastatingly observant Lena, who had been beside him for 6 years with the kind of steady love that makes even the most restless soul feel, at least occasionally, like it has found its shore. But beneath the starched collars and polished shoes, something older and quieter was waiting. It had always been waiting. It whispered in the fabric aisle of department stores, in the softness of silk against his fingers, in the secret notes he wrote to himself late at night when the apartment was dark and honest in a way the daylight never quite allowed. It whispered a name. He hadn't yet learned to say it out loud. The Saturday that changed everything arrived gray and unhurried, rain dragging its fingers down the window panes with the slow persistence of a thought you can't quite dismiss. Lena had been in one of her gentle moods, the kind that made her drift through rooms, touching things softly, the way people do when they're half present and half somewhere interior and beautiful. She had pulled out the old photo albums, the kind with sticky plastic pages that smell of another decade, and settled on the living room floor with tea going warm beside her. Max was in the kitchen, doing nothing in particular with the focused intensity of a man avoiding something. He heard the soft rustle of pages turning, the occasional quiet exhale of someone traveling through memory. And then silence. A different kind of silence. The kind that has weight. What Lena had found was not dramatic in its appearance. A drawer inside the old writing desk, the one that had followed them through 2 apartments and never quite found the right corner. Inside it, folded and stacked with a neatness that suggested ritual rather than accident, pages. Dozens of them. Some torn from notebooks, some typed and printed, some written on the backs of receipts and coffee shop napkins. A collection of notes spanning years, each one a confession, a question, a longing pressed into ink. And, between 2 of the pages, photographs. Max, alone in the apartment on evenings Lena had been away, dressed not in the armor of his daily life, but in things that belonged to a different register of himself entirely. Soft things. Honest things. She read every word. When Max finally wandered into the living room, hands wrapped around a mug he'd forgotten to actually drink from, Lena was sitting on the old comfortable sofa, the one that had witnessed every important conversation they'd ever had, with the notes resting in her lap like something she was taking very good care of. She looked up. Their eyes met, and the mug in Max's hands became suddenly very difficult to hold. Max, Lena began, her voice threaded with the particular gentleness of someone who has already decided how they feel and simply needs to say so. I found your notes today. And the photographs. The room contracted. Max felt the familiar instinct rise, the deflection, the minimizing. It's nothing really, just something I scribble sometimes, but something in Lena's expression stopped it cold. There was no accusation in her face. No alarm. No disguised horror dressed up as concern. There was only seeing. They spoke to me, she continued, her hand reaching out across the cushion between them. They spoke of someone who has been carrying something for a very long time. Max sat down slowly, the mug set aside, the performance finally and completely abandoned. I always meant to tell you, he said. The words came out smaller than intended. I just never found the right moment. I didn't have the right words. You had words, Lena said gently, her fingers finding his. Hundreds of them. Beautiful ones. You gave them to the drawer instead of to me. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of something long submerged breaking the surface and finding, to its astonishment, that the air was breathable. "I don't fully understand everything yet," Lena said carefully. "But I want to. And I want you to know that what I've read doesn't change a single thing about how I see you except that now I see more of you, and I think that's remarkable." Max stared at their joined hands. You'd want to understand it? "I've already called Dr. Ellis," Lena said simply. "She specializes in gender identity. She's warm and she's brilliant, and she said we can come whenever you're ready." The rain continued against the windows, steady and indifferent to the enormity of what was happening inside. But Max, for the first time in longer than he could name, felt something in his chest that wasn't exhaustion. It felt, cautiously and wonderfully, like relief. Dr. Anaya Ellis had the kind of presence that made rooms feel immediately safe, not because she was soft or placating, but because she was certain. Certain that whatever you brought through her door was worth the bringing. Certain that the mess of identity and longing and confusion that most people spent their lives pretending wasn't there was, in fact, the most human thing about them. Her office was painted in a shade of dusty sage that reminded Max of the morning before weather arrives. The chairs were deep and unhurried. A small succulent sat on the windowsill, thriving without being showy about it. Max would later think that the succulent was an apt metaphor. "Let's not rush toward any destination today," Dr. Ellis said at their first session, her hands folded loosely in her lap. "Let's just talk about where you are. Not where you think you should be, or where you're afraid you might be heading. Just where you are right now." It was the most disarming sentence Max had ever been asked to respond to. What came out over the following weeks surprised even him, not the feelings themselves, which he had lived with for so long they had become architectural, holding up walls he didn't know could come down. What surprised him was how complete the feelings were. How detailed. How they had a name already formed in the deepest quiet of himself, a name that had been waiting with the patient confidence of something that knows it will eventually be spoken.
"Maya."
He said it first in session 4, almost by accident, and then sat with the sound of it hanging in the sage-colored air. Dr. Ellis didn't react with theater. She simply said, "That name suits you. How does it feel to say it out loud?" Like Max paused, like turning on a light in a room you've been navigating in the dark for years. Lena, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand so hard he felt it in his shoulder. The decision to begin hormone therapy was not swift. It was built slowly, carefully, the way you build something you intend to last, session by session, conversation by conversation, fear by fear placed on the table and examined in honest light. There were fears, many of them, some reasonable, some less so. Fear of change and simultaneously fear of not changing. Fear of being wrong, of being right. Fear of losing things. Fear, beneath all the others, of not deserving the things that were being offered. It was Dr. Ellis who addressed that last one most directly. "Maya," she said one afternoon she had begun using the name with the same naturalness as breathing, "you don't have to earn the right to exist as yourself. That's not how it works. You already earned it by being born." The day the first pill was taken, Lena had arranged the morning with the quiet intention of ceremony. No fanfare. Just the two of them at the kitchen table with good coffee and pale sunlight and the particular hush that settles over moments that matter. Maya held the small pill in her palm for a moment and looked at it. Such a small thing to carry so much, she thought. She swallowed it with water. Lena set down her coffee cup and reached across the table with both hands. "However this goes," she said, "we go together." The changes came the way good things tend to, incrementally, almost indiscernibly, until one day you look up and realize how far the distance has grown between where you were and where you are. A softening around the jaw. A new quality to the skin. Something smoother and more honest. Eyes that carried a different light, not brighter, exactly, but clearer, like a window that has been cleaned. Maya examined these changes with the meticulous attention of someone who has waited a long time for something and intends to appreciate every stage of its arrival. Lena was her witness. She was there for the laser appointments, those clinical, fluorescent-lit rooms that were the least poetic part of the journey, but perhaps the most necessary. She held Maya's hand through every pulse of the machine, talking steadily about weekend plans and half-remembered films and the cafe they'd been meaning to try, her voice an anchor in the discomfort. Every little sting, she'd whisper as they walked back out into the open air. Is just the real you becoming easier to see? They spent evenings scrolling through clothing websites together, Lena leaning over Maya's shoulder with the focused enthusiasm of a person who had discovered an entirely new dimension of her partner and found it not alarming but fascinating. They discussed fabrics and silhouettes the way they had once discussed novels, with genuine investment, with the pleasure of exploring something that mattered. When parcels arrived, the living room became a dressing room. That one, Lena would say, pointing decisively. The sage one. Look, it does something to your eyes. And Maya would look, and slowly, the thing she saw in the mirror would stop being a surprise and start being a recognition. The first public outing as Maya was to a cafe. They knew well, a deliberate choice, the familiarity of it a kind of scaffolding for the new. And yet walking through the door felt like jumping off a perfectly reasonable ledge. Maya felt the glances. Some merely curious, some weighted with something less charitable. The room seemed to recalibrate around her entrance, conversations dipping fractionally, eyes moving and then deliberately moving away. She felt herself begin to contract. Lena felt it too. Without looking directly at her, she said quietly, "You belong here, exactly as you are. Don't let anyone else's discomfort become yours." At the counter, Lena introduced her naturally, the name landing in the air between them and the barista as easily as any other name. The barista smiled, took their order, gave them their receipt. It was so normal it almost undid Maya entirely. The family gathering came later and carried more complexity. Extended relatives who had known Max for years received Maya with reactions that formed a spectrum from the warmly curious to the quietly bewildered to the performatively uncomfortable. One relative, a woman named Brenda who had always held her opinions with both hands, looked Maya up and down over a glass of sparkling water and said, "So you're Maya now?" Just like that. Before Maya could navigate an answer, Lena stepped in with the elegant efficiency of someone who had quietly rehearsed for exactly this moment. "Not just like that," she said pleasantly. "It's actually been a long journey. But yes, Maya has always been there. We're just fortunate enough to know her properly now." Brenda processed this, looked at Maya, looked at Lena, then, surprisingly, "Well, you do look well." It wasn't a parade, but it was something. Over time, and it was real time, unmeasured and unrushed, the people in their lives adjusted. Some with grace, some with effort, some with a lag that required patience. Pronouns that initially arrived with hesitation began to come more naturally. Conversations that once stepped carefully around Maya's identity gradually stopped stepping around it at all. Lena's contribution to this shift was quiet and consistent. She answered questions without defensiveness. She corrected errors without dramatics. She educated without condescension. And she made it abundantly clear, by every action, that Maya was not a topic to be debated, she was simply a person to be known. Spring arrived like a kept promise. Maya remembered the morning precisely the way the light came through the curtains at an angle that felt deliberate, filling the bedroom with the particular gold of a season just arriving. She stood before the full-length mirror in a floral dress that she and Lena had found together on a warm afternoon in a small boutique downtown. Ivory background, small blooms in violet and rose, a silhouette that moved when she moved. She stood very still and looked. For the first time, not one of the first times, not almost the first time, but truly, completely the first time, the person in the mirror looked back without distance. Without the invisible pane of glass that had always existed between Maya and her own reflection, that subtle wrongness that she had learned so young to ignore and had never, until recently, been able to name. It was gone. The reflection was simply her. Continuous. Coherent. Whole. "Lena," she called, and her voice had a quality she didn't quite recognize, lighter than usual, like something recently set down. Lena appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, sleep-soft and unhurried. She looked at Maya in the mirror. Her eyes did something complicated and beautiful. "Oh," she said simply. "I know," Maya answered. Lena set down her cup and came to stand behind her, resting both hands gently on Maya's shoulders. Their reflections regarded each other, two women in morning light, 6 years of history between them, and ahead, something they hadn't yet been able to see clearly until now. "I feel beautiful," Maya said. The words arrived with the slight wonder of someone testing whether they're allowed to say a thing. "You always were," Lena replied, her voice steady and low and entirely sincere. "I've been watching you become what you already were for a long time. It's the best thing I've ever seen." Tears arrived without apology. Maya let them. Outside, through the parted curtains, the spring was doing its ordinary, extraordinary work, coaxing color from the ground, light from the air, the truth from the long winter. Inside, two women stood before a mirror and were simply present with the profound simplicity of a moment that had been a long, long time in the earning. Maya moved through the world differently now. Not loudly, not with the kind of confidence that announces itself, but with the quiet, rooted certainty of someone who has found the ground beneath their feet and learned to trust it. The accounting career had given way to something she hadn't anticipated: a compulsion to write, to speak, to find other people in the fog of self-discovery and hold out a hand. She began a blog, modest at first, then less modest as the letters arrived from strangers who said, "I thought I was alone, and I read your words and finally cried." Lena read every post before it went up, not to edit them, but because she loved them. Their apartment filled with new light, different art on the walls, different mornings, the same old comfortable sofa now covered in a throw of deep burgundy that Maya had chosen and Lena had immediately declared perfect. And sometimes, on evenings when the city settled into its quiet and the windows turned gold with the last of the sun, Maya would find herself simply sitting, not exhausted, not performing, not bracing, just sitting, with the particular ease of a person who has, after a great deal of effort and love and honesty, arrived somewhere real. The journey had not been a transformation from one thing into another. It had been an unfolding, the gradual, irreversible, deeply human act of allowing what is true to become visible. And in that visibility, in Lena's steady eyes, in Dr. Ellis's sage-colored office, in the stumbling kindness of relatives learning new names, in the stranger on the internet who typed "Thank you, I needed this" at 2 a.m, Maya found what she had always been looking for. Not just acceptance, recognition, the sense, at last, of being known. For everyone still folding themselves into drawers, the door is already open. Someone is already holding the light. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. Identity is not a destination. It is the bravest kind of journey, and no one should walk it alone.